let's talk some more about the earnings this afternoon with Apple shares under a bit of pressure following a report that basically hit everywhere analysts expected. Ben Bajarin joins me, CEO and Principal Analyst at Creative Strategies. Ben, thanks for being here this afternoon. Tell me about the number here, kind of firstly, the fact that everything seemingly came in line with expectations. Ben, is that going to be enough in your mind, or did Apple need to deliver some shock?
No, I think the expectations were relatively in line. I think that's a good read. It was an okay beat, but I don't think there was, call it drastic expectations on Apple this quarter, kind of like the likes we've seen from a few other earnings reports this week, specifically related to some of the AI lift stocks where it seems like expectations were perhaps a little bit so high. So I think this is a good in line. I think, again, this is a quarter where you just saw the launch of the iPhone. So it's not really one where people expect to see a gigantic uptick thanks to the strength of a new iPhone launch. I think that's going to be next quarter. Obviously, we're looking for commentary as, what does it look like in terms of uptake of iOS 18? It's been years since we used to care what operating system upgrades look like over a timely fashion. But since Apple Intelligence is on the horizon now launched, and there's going to be curiosity about how much of that is sort of helping move to the latest iOS and then also drive some level of interest. But, I think, again, strong overall. Obviously, they want to highlight it's a record with services as well. Just, again, the strength of the ecosystem. The other point being the installed base grows, which kind of seems like something they're saying every quarter. They're not losing customers. They're continuing to gain them, which I think just is the underlying fundamental of their growing user base that I think gives investors relative confidence in kind of where this company goes over the next few years.
Well said. The next few years, will we be calling it an AI stock? What do we know so far about how customers are impressed or awaiting the AI revelation as it comes to the applications on their phones?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of promise. I mean, I think the good thing from Apple's standpoint right now is I think Apple Intelligence is the most mature platform from a consumer standpoint, the way they've implemented it, whether that's just, Genmoji or simple writing skills to some level of search and visual intelligence. Like, these are things that people can start trying now. We've been on the beta for a while testing this with folks in our company. I think it meets kind of the expectations. It does what it says it does. There's obviously much more mature services and tools out there, Perplexity for search, a host of other things. But the reality is it delivers on what it says. And I think Apple's not over-promising there on the hype of AI, which I think is good. I expect we'll get some clarity to that on the call. But the hope is that this drives a software cycle that moves a hardware cycle to some degree. Like, I caution using the term super cycle, but the hope is this drives a better upgrade cycle than past years. And I think there's good reason to support that thesis.
Okay. As far as the consumer health, does any of that get in the way, or have we seen enough strength in the economy, jobs, that people are going to shell it out for these phones, as well as the discounts and stuff that the carriers are going to give? Is that any worry at all?
Not in the U.S., at least not in subsidy markets. I do think there's questions still on China. Again, part of the thesis for China was that Apple would still come back against competition there with Apple Intelligence, but we have no idea when Apple Intelligence is going to release in China. I know our research indicates that the consumer-facing AI features in China is actually much more mature. You've got more customers using some of these AI tools on their devices in China, and they're under pressure with, again, some degree of premium Android starting to do better with some vendors like MediaTek, and I think Qualcomm as well will support that. And so I think the China question is really that big one, because, again, and that's not a subsidy market. But where there's products are subsidized, we expect that to go very strong. I think the question is really going to be, does mix shift change? I mean, I've had this belief that they may skew more toward the intro level iPhones versus the Pros, because, again, you've got a really aged base. That aged base doesn't necessarily need the latest and greatest. They know that about themselves. And so we're curious to see if there's an ASP hit when some of this gets modeled, and really whether the balance comes back to the entry-level iPhones or if it still skews Pro like it usually does in the first two quarters.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting way to see kind of what commitment there is at this point to the full refresh, and how investors, or rather customers, kind of see this as a marginal improvement. Do you think everything else looks smooth here in terms of streaming, in terms of services? It looks to me like Apple's about as reliable as it's ever been at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you just look at the reaction really over the course of this year. Even when there's been a little bit of disappointment on the stock, it didn't move a lot. I think the overall consensus within investors is that this still remains super strong. I think, again, that comes off the base of this very loyal base, right? They hit that every earnings. We've got a loyal base. We've got high customer satisfaction. We don't lose customers. We just gain new ones. And we monetize those customers through device upgrades and services. I mean, that's just been the steady rock that they've built on and will continue to grow from it. I don't think anybody believes any of those foundations are threatened.
All right. Well said. Well argued. And Apple adding a few bucks while we're talking. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate your take.
Yep. Good to see you. Happy next time.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Ben Bajarin, CEO and Principal Analyst at Creative Strategies.